Thank you for the kind introductory words, Carl, and thank you all for the introduction and for the invitation to this workshop. It's really a great pleasure for me to be a part of this first workshop in our joint initiative. And I'm really grateful to the Accademia di Lincei to go forward by having organized this first workshop as the starting point of a long-term research initiative. I think I do not need to mention that I would prefer to be with all of you in Rome now, enjoying the Academy's hospitality and a certainly wonderful spring day in Italy. Here in Halle, it's raining and we have 13 degrees right now. So I think Rome must be better now. However, we all know that and why this cannot be possible in these days. I do mention this not in order to lament this missed opportunity to come to Rome, but to recall instead and to insist on that the Accademia di Lincei was willing to lead the way for all other participating academies. European research is making progress, and we are able to keep up the European idea and the mutual friendship and the academic aspiration we all share with our joint initiative, despite the difficult situation we are all aware of. I was asked to say a few words about the origins and the genesis of our European Academies research initiative. I have to confess that I am not a historian by profession, but a literary scholar with a specialization on Enlightenment and early 20th century literature. Carl mentioned my research focus on Enlightenment. So I'm not as an academic, but merely as a science manager. However, as all of you are certainly aware, science management is never a one-man or one-woman show, but it depends on a joint initiative, on people willing to contribute to a joint enterprise and to put a lot of commitment in this. A friend of mine from Luxembourg once said with regard to management processes in economy, il faut choisir une équipe de fous. And I think she's right with this. I'm glad that from the start we formed such a team, and no insult intended, as a matter of course. The history of the joint European History of Academies Research Initiative traces back to a workshop series organized by the Académie des Sciences, the Royal Society, and the German National Academy of Sciences, Leopoldina. Wolfgang mentioned this in his words. This precursor project focused on the history of the three academies that had instigated the series, with a focus on the period before, during, and after World War I. However, it was clear from the beginning that a research initiative on European academies cannot and should not be limited to only a few protagonists, given that an international network of cooperation in science had shaped the respective research developments as well as the political positions and stances the academies took up. The starting point of this idea was actually the 100th anniversary of the beginning of World War I. 1 year before, in 2013, the Leopoldina had established its Center for Science Studies. Since approximately 15 years then, the Leopoldina had fostered research on its 20th century history. Jens Thiel, who was one of the main researchers who worked in these early projects, will give us a survey on the state of research a little bit later today. So one thing was absolutely clear when we considered possible future projects at the center. We wanted to address the international perspective because we felt that this was one of the main research desiderata. One advantage was that the Leopoldina had and still has a decent international membership. So the first thing we did at that time was to ask Leopoldina members Uta Frith from London and Claude de Bru from Paris if the Royal Society, Uta is a fellow of the Royal Society, and the Académie des Sciences, Claude is a member of the Académie des Sciences, would be interested in initiating some kind of joint enterprise. An enterprise, however, that not only was meant to bring these three academies and their members and fellows closer together, but a research project that jointly addresses a topic that can only be dealt with in a comparative and joint European perspective: the history of European academies and other scientific institutions before, during, and after World War I. This choice to ask the Royal Society and the Académie des Sciences first and to form a tripartite alliance was by no means a decision of excluding others. From the beginning, it was clear that we planned to include other European academies and also academies and institutions outside of Europe in this project. This was well reflected already in the first workshop of the series, which took place in Halle, organized by the Leopoldina in October 2014. This first workshop brought together internationally renowned historians and historians of science and representatives of several academies whose nations had actively participated in World War I. The goal of this workshop was to present the results of previous research on the topic of the impact of World War I on the respective academies and on their international relations, and to start a comparative discussion. So we started by gathering the state of the art of research with regard to several academies and their political positioning. The focus of this workshop was new, as Wolfgang Eckert and I have written in the introductory text to the volume we edited after the workshop. This is the volume. I quote in English translation: while the topic science and World War I was relatively often a topic of academic symposia and printed contributions, by mainly focusing on the technical scientific conditions and invitations of the new kind of technical industrial warfare, the focus on the world of academies seems to open the perspective, given that the academic world organizes itself not only in universities, but also in research institutions and academies outside of universities. End of quote. The volume, published in the historical book series of the Leopoldina, Acta Historica Leopoldina, included 9 articles, all newly written for this book. It's impossible to go into detail and to describe all articles. Thus, I just want to highlight some research perspective that demonstrates the width of research perspectives contained in this first book. Maurice Godet, for example, described convincingly the vantage of the French intelligentsia before and during World War I. Claude Debruy focused on an insightful survey on the French academies during the war. Dmitry Zaprikin from Moscow described the Great War as a crucial point in the history of Russian science and technology. Jens Thiel turned our attention to the Prussian Academy of Sciences, much more important these days in the early 20th century than the relatively small Leopoldina. I was also very glad that both the Académie des Sciences and the Royal Society had sent representatives to give welcoming speeches at our meeting in October 2014. Philippe Taquet, at that time president of the Institut de France and the Académie des Sciences, touchingly reported on the history of his own family during World War I. And Keith Moore, the head librarian of the Royal Society, expressed his deep conviction that joint initiatives are needed to foster the European idea. This was in 2014, but I think that Keith is still absolutely right. The second workshop of this research initiative on a comparative history on World War I was organized by the Académie des Sciences in cooperation with the Université de Metz. I think it was Claude's idea to conduct the second workshop in the area where the most intense battlegrounds of World War I were located. Claude Debruy, who was the main organizer of this workshop, writes in the preface of the proceedings volume, a quote, "Ce volume est consacré à ce qui s'est passé dans les académies et institutions de recherche pendant la Première Guerre mondiale." So the focus of the second workshop and the second volume, which was also published in the Acta Historica series, this is this one. So the focus of this book lay on the inner academic changes and the impact of the war. However, Claude had organized a comprehensive and convincing program that included papers on the one hand on additional national academies, such as a paper on the Italian academies, presented by today's host Giovanni Paoloni, on the Austrian Academy by Johannes Feichtinger, who also will present a paper today, and on the Hungarian Academy by Tibor Frank, for example. On the other hand, the second workshop also included presentations on personal interactions or conflicts. I remember well, for example, the impressive paper by Maxime Schwarz, the former director of the Institut Pasteur, on Pasteur and his disciples. Jens Thiel and Matthias Berg presented at this workshop, probably for the first time, her idea of preparing an edition of speeches that were held at academies between 1914 and 1918. And this edition, this book, was to form the third publication in the context of a joint project. The volume by Matthias Berg and Jens Thiel presented selected speeches that were presented at European Academies during World War I. The editors had gathered renowned annotators who were responsible to choose from the speeches and to comment on them intensely. So this volume not only broadened the scope of comparative research on the topic of academies in World War I, but it also offers an invaluable collection of relevant sources. The sources are given in German, French, or English with regard to the audience. The volume includes texts on 6 different German academies. Germany has a national academy only since 2008. On the Austrian Academy, the French Academies, the Royal Society, the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Académie Royale de Belgique, the Hungarian Academy, the Romanian Academy, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and others. This is really an impressive collection. As a matter of course, every collection has to answer the question of what is included and what is not. But everyone who has ever only attempted to make the effort to put together such a large amount of excellent translators and excellent contributors knows that this would be really a trite remark. Thank you again, Jens Thiel, for this really wonderful volume. The third and the final workshop of the series was organized by the Royal Society and it took place in September 2018 in the grand premises of the Royal Society. I'm very glad that we could convince Oxford historian Robert Fox to organize this workshop with the support of Keith Moore and Wolfgang Eckert. From the beginning, we wanted to open up the perspective on the afterwar period. I think it was Robert who coined the word during the conference that the war was not over for academics until at least the mid-20s. So this third workshop joined the 2 preceding workshops in sharing the international vantage, but it added the focus on the question of what had happened after the war. I was hoping to have a copy of the book in hands right now, but it still is in print, so we just need to be a bit patient. Wolfgang and I have the advantage that we already know what will be in the book, so we have some kind of advantage today. I think it represents well the outstanding quality of the workshop. The title of this final volume is Blockades of the Mind, Science Academies and the Aftermath of the Great War. And it includes articles by, for example, Florian Lagarde on the difficult collaboration of Eddington and Strömgren between 1919 and 1922, a British-French cooperative article by Daniel Fouque and Robert Fox on internationalism, national interests, and the order of world science, or Brooke Penalosa-Patzak from Vienna on the interwar struggle for German science and art. It is really a pity that I can, in every case, only highlight a few articles and a few contributors. There are much more. However, it always was clear to the initiators of this first project that this triple alliance between France's, the UK's, and Germany's National Academy was only the starting point of a larger research initiative. We were convinced, first, that the research topic focusing on the question how academies relate to politics is a largely unexplored area of research. We were convinced, second, that a comparative approach in the field of history of science is urgently needed to cope with the European and the international character of academic networks since the late 19th century. Third, that the methods used in a possible continuation of this idea shall not be limited to an institutional history. Last but not least, that it is necessary to include further academies into a steering committee to establish a wider basis and a multiplicity of research perspectives. On this basis, the Leopoldina invited members, fellows, or affiliates to 7 European national academies in June 2019 to talk about such a research initiative. We met in Halle then on a wonderful summer day in the building of Leopoldina Center for Science Studies. All participants representing the respective national academies from Austria, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, and the United Kingdom agreed to be part of the initiative. Jörg Hacker, Leopoldina president at that time, and Gunnar Berg, Leopoldina vice president, opened this meeting. They expressed Leopoldina's full support for this European consortium. We soon agreed that the aim of the proposed joint initiative is to institutionalize a European dialogue on research-related issues. The academies should be equal partners in the initiative, with a maximum of freedom to find interesting topics, to choose ways of organizing research, and so on. As experts for their country, they know best which research topics are interesting and feasible in their respective academic context. The basic idea of this research initiative is that it is supposed to open up new realms of cooperation and not to restrict these realms. Thus, the association of the academies should be as little bureaucratic as possible. Looking back, I was overwhelmed of experiencing of how welcome this joint idea was for all participating academies. There was no real debate or no controversy, neither on the question if we should do that, nor how we should do that. The main focus of our meeting on this summer day in Halle almost 2 years ago was actually what could be possible topics for such a joint approach. And I quote from the minutes just to give you an overview of what we discussed then and what we still have in mind as possible future topics for our workshop series. And this is really a long list. And I think I don't know if I should present them all, but I'll start. Possible topics for future workshops in this context. What do we know about the role of women in academies, or women's science and politics? Or what does Cold War mean for the development of the academies? Or which roles did and do the academies play in international relationships, especially with regard to Eastern European academies? Or what is the specific role of the Royal Swedish Academy? How did experts in the Nobel Committee deal with the Cold War? How can we describe the relationship of academies to scientific changes in the 1960s and 70s? Or what was the impact of the international debate on science of science to the development of academies? How can the role of academies in organizing research in Eastern and Western Europe can be analyzed? What can science do behind the scenes to promote international understanding? What can science do to address current issues such as the underrepresentation of certain groups in the membership or fellowship of academies? We could do research on travel grants or long-term funding from academies. So how does funding work for academies? We could do research on integration effects in Cold War, on exchange projects. We could do research on the question if there is an Eastern and a Western epistemology. And we could, in general, address political, institutional, and epistemological research questions. As you can see, there are plenty of things to discuss and to do. We also agreed very soon that the general topic or some kind of umbrella title for the whole series should be Academies and Politics, Cold War and Beyond. The design of this process and of this group allows every participating academy to include the respective state of research in their country and to develop workshop titles, topics, and programs along the guidelines of this initiative. I think that is the most important cement that binds us together as a truly European initiative. We are all obliged to comparative research perspectives and to openness for any method or topic that fits in with the general theme of this initiative. All academies agreed to conduct workshops on a specific subject fitting the main topic. Each academy is fully responsible for the workshop and for the conference they are willing to organize. However, all participants are convinced that it can prove very helpful to include the other academies of this initiative in the scientific preparation. And I was so glad to see that the organizing committee of this workshop, which was organized by the Accademia di Lincei, just represented this idea of coming together and discussing together the ideas directed by the Accademia di Lincei, but joining in all participating academies. That's a wonderful thing. Preferably, all countries of the initiative should be represented in the event, either by contributors from the respective country or by representatives of the academy. All participating academies of the steering committee propose to organize workshops in the forthcoming years. The Accademia di Lincei was ready to begin. This is why we are here today. Then follow the Royal Swedish Academy, the Austrian Academy, the Czech Academy of Sciences, the Royal Society, the Académie des Sciences, and the Leopoldina. As a matter of course, there was some delay due to the coronavirus, so we needed to postpone the first workshop and also the subsequent events. However, we are here to start. And I wish to emphasize that I'm very grateful to the Accademia di Lincei and its representatives to give us this wonderful opportunity to start with a joint research. Thank you very much.